Welcome to the U3 Media Podcast, where our mission is to unite the world through coffee. I'm Christy Ross, and joining us today is Kevin Sinnott, creator and host of CoffeeCon. Welcome, Kevin. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Christy.
Absolutely. So there's a lot to talk about today. So you produced and hosted a DVD series on coffee brewing secrets 17 years ago, and you're an author who published the book The Art and Craft of Coffee, and you did that, I want to say, almost 15 years ago. And you started CoffeeCon, a conference for the end consumer, the coffee connoisseur, about 14 years ago. So that's a lot of coffee content in your history. But even before you did coffee, and before coffee was a thing for you, you were in production. So share a little bit about your background in production.
Well, my background in production started at 8 years old. My dad was a filmmaker, an amateur filmmaker. So I was the audio guy because my dad would give me a golf club and a microphone would be taped onto it, gaff taped onto it. And then he told me, stand here. And then when I got a little older, I was big enough, he'd strap the recorder to me for her sound. And I would go around with him and he would be the cameraman and director and I would be the sound guy. So
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. So then that was the start for your production career, if you will. I mean, did you go and work for a larger network then later?
yeah, I did. Well, I from then on, my dad actually invented legal videotaping. So he was a lawyer as a full-time gig, and he invented the idea of capturing witness testimony and we also did videos that were reenactments and sort of documentaries about people who had horrific accidents. So I really learned a good bedside manner. I learned to direct from doing that because you still have to direct them.
Yeah, well, it's just a really interesting storyline. I never really thought about that in terms of having production, sort of serve that purpose. So interesting. So I wanna talk a little bit about. I saw that you graduated from Players Workshop of the Second City. And one thing that I have discovered over the course of a lot of interviews that I've done previously is when people go into business, right, having a training sort of in improv is so valuable. So tell us a little bit about how the Players Workshop at Second City helped you in all the different things that you've built.
I got a personal manager named Larry McManus, and Larry was a Chicago guy, and Larry had a background in comedy. Larry owned a club out in Des Plaines, I want to say, called the Maroon Raccoon, and I appeared there a few times, and Larry finally said he would like to manage me. He said, I want to be your manager. And then the first thing he told me to do is not comedy, but do something. But he said, I think you should take some improv classes. You have a real good wit. And I said, well, thank you. And I did. So I did whatever he told me to do. I was great. One of the reasons even though I couldn't pay him a lot of times, he would say, you just keep the money. And I said, why are you doing this for me? And he said, well, you know what? Of all my clients I've ever had, you're the one that really took my advice. And that means a lot to me. So anyway, he was very sympathetic. He's a great mentor in my life. But I definitely found that improv really taught me to think about the physical space and how I was interacting, even in a meeting, even in a conference room. Mm-hmm. Even if you're sitting and you're not allowed to stand up, and there is a great opportunity is if you're an entrepreneur, you've always got to have a point in the meeting where you show the passion of your beliefs in your project enough to stand up and start walking around. Like, watch any scene in a film. They always let the lead actor do that. And how you handle that space is really important. So I
So
love
true.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the number one reason to take improv classes.
Yeah. Yeah, improv is so valuable, and you're right that the energy you bring to the room matters, right? It's production at the end of the day when you're giving a presentation or trying to pitch your business. So the other thing you said too about your mentor, I he highlighted something that's also a what I view as a very valuable skill, and that's being coachable. And it sounds like you were very coachable, and he appreciated that you took his advice. So I love that too. So why coffee? Like, connect the dots for me. Like, how did coffee come into your world?
Yeah, I had a client for about 3 years that was a large company in Chicago, and I did some comedic themed videos for them. They had a training series for their salespeople. And one thing I knew about salespeople inherently is how no attention span unless it's interesting and fun. We won a few awards for them too, and they were very useful because they taught me about how to put content and keep it fun and always with that idea. Then I lost that job. I just suddenly, everything fell apart, and I realized, wow, a, a creative person at a company, you think after a while you're kind of bulletproof. They'd won awards and they were doing great with these videos, and suddenly I was out of work, and I just never thought it would come to an end, I guess. So I was nursing my wounds with Larry McManus, and we were drinking coffee. And while he was listening to me, lending a sympathetic ear, I started analyzing the coffee for him. And he said, Kevin, I know your life is falling apart, but here you are explaining coffee to me. He said, why don't you write about coffee? And I mean, he said it, I think, kind of sarcastically, but then I went home and I wrote that night. I stayed up all night and I wrote about 10 articles. I took them to a quick print place at the time, and then I gave him a copy of it. I called it the Coffee Companion. He took this newsletter and he sent it to USA Today with a post-it note on it that said, "This is my friend Kevin. He likes coffee better than sex."
That'll get a media company to pick it up.
And they did. They printed a blurb about it. Not thankfully, not that one, but they something more family friendly.
So talk a bit about sort of the newsletter and blog, and then how that led to you writing your own book. Like, what was that actually directly related to you publishing the art and craft of coffee? Was it you
Yes.
compiling all those newsletters? Like, how did that come about, and why did you decide to write the book?
Well, first of all, I had an earlier book called Great Coffee. It's very rare, and that was a labor of love. Art of Craft of Coffee is probably a better book, but was real work, and that was tedious for me.
Well, so do you have to keep updating the book, or is it pretty much information that just doesn't change?
I wrote it very selfishly. I wrote it so that you would only have to buy it once, and it would be pretty much standard. I hoped never have to write it again. I
Mhm.
never wanted to write another book after writing that book. It was too tedious.
Why?
My
Because
wife
it's
had to
just a lot
lock
of work?
my wife had to lock me in the basement. It was a lot of process work and
Yeah.
too much left brain work. I like being expansive. I love setting visions and then having fun on various parts of the creation of it. I like being involved and interfering in production whenever and wherever I like, but I really don't like process and tedious and routine at all.
I
I
like that you say interfering because
Yeah.
because
Well, that's what it is.
yeah,
I've
yeah.
had more than one crew person confess that to me. over a drink,
Uh,
not coffee.
yeah, that's awesome. So so can you share, like, let's say like three takeaways from your book, or a couple takeaways from your book?
Well, I wanted to teach people the importance of brewing. I'm always an evangelist for that.
Mhm.
Brewing is as important as anything you can learn in coffee, far more important, really, than learning how to roast or learning how to even choose coffees.
Mhm.
The roasters do a pretty good job of that. Your job as a consumer, as an end user, is really to know how to take these little beans and turn them into this beautiful elixir with a certain viscosity, a certain taste, a certain acidity, a balance of flavors, and extract that all
Mhm.
into one cup. So that
Nice.
is what I did. That was my goal every moment of both books,
Mhm.
and everything I've written or done about coffee is to express that. Second of all, it was wanting people to understand specifically that in brewing, grind is usually the weakness. Whenever someone calls me up, a friend, and I've given them some coffee and they don't have a grinder, so I give them a grinder and I say, well, it's a it's a loan, and it's still there, and I will. They'll always call up and say, my coffee's still not like it was that day in your kitchen. Would you pay a house call? And I do. And we figure it out together. And I always find out it's the grinding. They don't,
Yeah.
getting that grind right. And unfortunately, it's a very difficult thing to express to someone and get to the point where you can just look at the grind and see it's too coarse or too
Mhm.
fine,
Right.
and getting the right one, etc. So though that's really important. And then I think the third thing I feel just as passionately about is a sentence. I believe I'm old enough to remember Andrew Whale. Do you know who I'm talking about? Andrew Whale used to be a self-help guru,
The
and
name sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
he wrote The Natural Mind, which is the book that I think I'm in thinking of. And Andrew Whale uh, always talked about drugs, and he was either a baby boomer or a young silent generation, but he was a professor that somehow made drugs seem like an academic subject worthy of being at Harvard, and I'm sure he was a Harvard guy too. And he had a philosophy that set and setting. He talked about drugs being noisy or not based upon how important it was to have the right set and setting. And I
Mhm.
believe that coffee is that kind of drug. It's a drug that, first of all, it's a paradoxical drug. It relaxes you and it excites you at the same time. It's probably one reason I really love it.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
for sure.
then it's also very important to have the right person to have it with, and to I think that makes so much difference to me. I remember the one of the I always remember my favorite cups of coffee first and foremost by who I had it with.
I agree. I agree. Your environment, your surrounding, who you're sharing it with, it all adds to the experience. 100%.
And I wanted to stress that in everything I've done.
Yeah, it's the people and the connections, though, right? It's the people
Yeah.
and connections that add to the experience and the coffee and how
Oh,
you enjoy it. So,
yeah, it's a
yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's the
right.
Beatles with the guru,
Yes,
the
yes.
Maharishi.
So one of the things, one of the things I saw on your website, you have a tremendous amount of great content even on your website. Now, how do you compete with other coffee content producers, if you will?
Yeah, that is difficult, and I almost think it's impossible. I'm at the point where probably I put out there what I put out there, and then I just say, and it gets me to, if you don't mind, I'm going to already use the quote that you had asked me to think of a quote that propelled me in life, and I do have one, and it's a quote of Chesterton, G.K. Chesterton, who said, "Anything worth doing is worth doing badly."
Doing badly.
I love it.
I
I know it
I
sounds
don't
like
think
it's
I don't think I
counterintuitive.
heard that one though.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, isn't it? But it is brilliant. Because and for those of us who are perfectionists, and believe me, I'm used to being locked in an editing room for days at a time, where I am driving some poor person nuts. I was going to say another word, uh, because I'm having them take another quarter of a second away from from a scene to get the timing just right in the actor's take, type of stuff. And it's just at the end of the day, it's like my wife, who was my editor for years, said to me once. I said to her, "Pat, now you know." We watched the finished show, and I said, "Now you know why I shoot 20 takes." And she
Yeah.
leans back and she goes, "I used your first one."
I love your wife, by the way.
Yeah, I do too. Not that at that moment I didn't, but it was I did. She doesn't suffer fools well, so it's been kind of hard on me. What Chesterton was saying is, if the perfectionism in people can stop them from publishing, it
Mhm.
can stop them from expressing.
Right. Right.
And that's what you gotta love something so much that at CoffeeCon, I went from working with editing things to real life, real time, something I said I would never do. It's why I didn't go on and work at Second City,
Mhm.
because I couldn't stand the idea of not being able to get it right before
Uh,
the public sees it.
yeah.
Anyone who works in television is so used to that.
Mhm.
So now I go and I do a live event
Yeah.
where it's good, bad, indifferent. It has to go.
Yeah, yeah. I have a philosophy just in building businesses, like better done than perfect. Like forward movements, like really important. So let's talk about CoffeeCon a little bit. You started talking about your lovely wife, and you work with her on CoffeeCon, and I think you started it in 2010. So what was the spark for CoffeeCon? And talk a little bit about the two of you working together.
She's one of those people that is probably at the end of the day more artistic than I am and equally creative, but she's not a big noise about it. She's very happy to let me be the front person, and
Mhm.
partly because there's a risk to that too that I don't think she would like. But I definitely admire her because she's able to let me be a blowhard and take the credit, and she knows down deep, well, that was my idea, and that's okay. He needs it because he had a bad childhood and I didn't. So I don't know. I We're all rationalizing, but I definitely love working with her. Although it's horrible to people who aren't used to it. I mean, we've never had a Christmas dinner where it didn't end up into a work discussion.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. But so talk a little bit about CoffeeCon, because I'll be honest, this year is the first year well, we attended as U3 Coffee. But had I known that existed prior, I would have been there every year. So it's geared towards the end consumer. You see a lot of
Mhm.
conferences, right, in for the coffee industry that are for professionals,
Yeah.
but this is for the end customer, and it was awesome. So talk a little bit about the customer, how that first year started versus where you guys are today.
So I realized there were disadvantages, and trade shows are really not ideal for consumers.
They're
And
not, yeah.
they're a different animal, and in some ways I've gone to a lot of trade shows. I still go to trade shows. Now I go for a different reason because I'm trying to sign up exhibitors, but I would also say, the average consumer doesn't care about a lot of things that a lot of trade shows have. For instance, a coffee trade show is going to have everything from janitor supplies to insurance for your
Mhm.
store to all sorts of things that are very important to the trade, but
Yeah.
not important. In fact, I would argue they ruin the glamour of it a little bit. They
Yeah.
kind of de-romanticize it, and someone like me, I'm able to kind of process it and just kind of ignore it, but I think
Yeah.
the average person would find it dull.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. What would you say is the best piece of feedback you got from any coffee con that you've done over the years, meaning from the people that attended it? What's the best
Uh,
piece of feedback?
they wanted, well, this year we finally started asking roasters to bring samples of beans to give away.
Mhm.
And if I really realized my own life, yeah, I would have to say a big turn on in going to a trade show is I usually am the best smelling passenger on the airplane coming back. And I even start giving coffee away, usually at the airport. Um, but we didn't think of that at first. We thought
Yeah.
the liquid samples would be enough, and I'm glad we did that. That was something that we got from consumers.
Yeah, they're not there to hear all just about your company. They're there to learn and experience the coffee, right?
Yes, and one thing I've learned from presenters, I've had a number of presenters tell me that my audience was tougher than a trade show audience. And of course they are, and I know why that is. There's nothing, in fact, if you're, I have a lot of interests, and I can assure you the highest end amateurs and the collectors and are far more knowledgeable than almost anyone in the trade is. They may
Mhm.
not have hands-on experience at all, but
Mhm.
as far as knowing factoids about
Yeah.
things and inner stories and stuff, they've done their research.
Yeah. I agree with that. Actually, when we were at CoffeeCon, one of the things that we did is we interviewed a number of coffee consumers. So we had our big green screen up, if you remember,
Yes, yes,
and
I
so
do
we
remember.
interviewed a number of consumers. And I expected to hear, one of the questions we asked, and which I'll ask you here today too, was, what is their go-to cup of coffee? I really expected to hear more people, talking about lattes or macchiatos or, just it's anything with like a lot of cream and sugar in it. And I was actually really surprised that way more of them are just black coffee drinkers.
Mm.
They really appreciated the level of, all the way down to, I've even got some answers on particular origins. And I just didn't expect that, to be honest. But yeah, they knew their stuff and they were happy to share, facts and things that they've experienced in coffee. So it was a lot of fun.
We had the opposite happen once at a show where I overheard a coffee roaster. Someone asked for cream at the and the coffee roaster said, "I don't think you want to ask that question around here." And
Oh, really?
I cringed, and I went up to the person
Yeah.
afterwards. I was not near their space. I followed them away from it, and I said, "Hey, I just want you to know it's my event. There's a cream table right over there, and but
Mhm.
I and I we don't want to discourage you. We want you to have it however you want." Uh,
Exactly. You want to meet the customer where they
yeah,
are and how they enjoy it, and we're happy to serve it that way, right? Yeah.
but we have found there is it depends on what level they are. Now, I really am trying to increase. I want to always have it be accessible.
Yeah, they are. It's a wide range of customers. It was fabulous to attend. So, just really quick numbers here. So, how many people attended this past year? So, how many people were at your first one versus how many people are at your most recent one?
Our first show had 1,000 people.
Mhm.
The one we just had 3,400, I believe.
That's impressive. That's
It is
impressive.
impressive.
Yeah.
We I think we want to get, well, 5,000 would make me even happier. 10,000 in the right venue
Hmm.
with enough exhibitors would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
probably my wife's goal.
How many different cities are you in? And is CoffeeCon a for profit or non for profit?
Not for profit.
Okay.
We were not for years, and actually the head of the Specialty Coffee Association met with us, and he talked about the possibility of purchasing us. And he said, "Are you a not for profit or a for profit?" I said, "Well, we're for profit, and we're capitalists, you know, in an uneasy way."
Hmm.
But he said, "I think it's a mistake," and it haunted me, and I thought, why does he think that? And he was a bright guy, and we decided about a year ago to change it. I just wanted, first and foremost, I want the consumers the I want the consumers to own it in the spiritual sense. Absolutely. It
Hmm.
should be their show.
Yeah.
It's for them.
Right.
So it's in that regard, the closest we could come to that would be a not-for-profit
Yeah.
foundation model. And
Yeah.
I believe the future is sort of that right now, post-COVID.
Yeah. So, how many different cities, just thinking of COVID, right? I mean, these in person events, and it kind of is all about the in person experience because you want them to taste the coffee and talk to the roasters and attend the classes, have a two-way conversation. You can have a two-way conversation like we are today on Zoom, but you can't be tasting the coffee, right?
No.
So how many different cities are you in today?
Well, today, right today, we're in one because we are post COVID, we're rethinking how to tune this whole thing. And we really need, I have a board. I have two board members currently. I had three, and the third board member got too busy with his own business. So
Mhm.
we're looking for a new board member. But we have two board members, and we met with them after the last event, and they said, for now, plan your next year's event in the area here, and we're going to
Mhm.
have it in Naperville.
And Naperville's about 40 minutes from Chicago for anybody that doesn't know the Naperville area. So, all right. So I literally could talk to you for like a whole other hour, but I have a couple questions I want to run past you. Sort of, I'll say sort of more rapid fire in just throwing out some quick answers. So, can you share a general coffee industry stat that you find interesting or fascinating?
The most interesting stat that I would find, I'm a- I did my own research, and this has been a while. I'd like to do it again on how people take their coffee at major chains.
Hmm.
When I did it, 80% plus at Starbucks did put something in their coffee, whether it
Hmm.
was milk or a sweetener of some kind. And I thought that was really interesting because I sometimes question, I'm glad to hear you say that people told you over and over again that they like to drink the coffee without anything in it.
Hmm.
That's very heartening about when I know the goals of the industry would be that. All I can say is the numbers I've gotten so far have not supported that. So I
Yeah,
always keep
and
track of that.
but Kevin, you're spot on. I think the like general American population is more on that 80%. That's why when I sort of expected that's what I was going to see
Yeah,
walking around CoffeeCon.
interesting.
But you have some people that really truly are diehards and true coffee connoisseurs. And maybe it wasn't always like that in prior years. I don't know. But it surprised me because I expected exactly like right around that 80%.
Very no, it's very interesting. Well, I'm glad. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'm gonna keep an eye on that.
Okay, so along those same lines of interesting stats, Can you share a random, like, fascinating fact that maybe most coffee consumers probably don't know?
I think as far as freshness goes, freshness of coffee in the industry is generally regarded from the roaster 2 weeks. And I think most people are shocked to find out how perishable coffee really is.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's almost would preclude you from ever buying it in a grocery store. Now, right on top of that, I want to make sure I say this because I'll be boiled in oil by the industry for pointing that out without adding this. There is something called nitrogen flushing that some roasters
Hmm.
do when they're packaging their coffee. And nitrogen flush has gotten better over the years to the point that I regularly will buy coffees everywhere and just try them out just to see how fresh they are.
Hmm.
And I'm surprised that the average bean coffee in a grocery store has gotten fresher the retained its freshness over the
Hmm.
years. Speaking of that, the best grind you can possibly get, though, is pre-ground. And the best technical ground, best suited for almost any coffee method, is pre-ground coffee. It is a roller grinder ground, by the way, and that's the largest. The big bad coffees are always beautifully ground.
Yeah.
So whatever
Yeah.
they lack in taste and origin, so you got to balance that out. I mean, I obviously don't drink too many of those kinds of coffees, but the grinding is really the last of the things that needs to be mastered. There's a long way to go. Even the
Hmm.
best home grinders are not as capable.
Yeah. Well, and that's you pointed that out before too, of how very important the grind is. So love that. Okay, I'm gonna flip over to the U3 top three.
Okay,
Number one, what is your favorite brewing method?
the siphon. Siphon.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't get that answer too often. Okay, for consumption, your coffee drink of choice, like black, latte, hot, cold, specific origin, wash.
I like washed coffees the best. I am not I'm still hot and cold on some of the new processes, maceration, um, the different types, geisha beans.
Mhm.
My taste buds, I always have to say, I seek out. Now, sometimes there are some beautiful dry process coffees, but I still prefer overall washed coffees.
Okay, Kevin, how many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
Uh, usually three. They are perfect and they are 6 ounces or less.
Wow. Okay, mine are way too big. I uh
King size cocktails,
yes,
I know,
yes.
I like those.
Yeah. That's true. Me too. Me too. All right, Kevin, I want to give you an opportunity to share more where someone can learn more about you and learn about CoffeeCon.
Well, the best place, let me give you a couple of sites, and one of them is very obscure, and I don't contribute very much to it at this point. But it's my file cabinet online, and I just open it up. I mean, it doesn't have any ads there, and it's a great place to go. Is coffeecompanion.com. But there's a lot of reviews going back to the early 1990s. I think even some of my best interviews are there. Erna Knudsen's there. Uh, all sorts of people that are
Yeah.
historic figures in coffee.
Yeah.
The other thing is YouTube. Right now, my coffeeist here. This is my hat. I decided not to wear the hat. Everybody on YouTube wears a hat, but coffeeist, and I decided to get Ken Davids, who taught the tasting class at CoffeeCon. Ken, I've known for years. He knows far more than I do about coffee I'll ever know, and I'm trying best I can to archive and memorialize every thought that he has, because he is the most valuable person to listen to in the industry. And
So where are you memorializing that, Kevin? Where can
YouTube,
someone
on
find that?
YouTube, Coffeeist. Put Coffeeist in as a YouTube term. If I'm not mistaken, that's where it is. If you can't find it there, put CoffeeCon in, and it'll come up. So,
Perfect.
search term. But those are two places that I think are the best place you can get closer to me and find out what at least I like.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. I learned so much about you, Kevin, that I did not know initially.
Maybe
So
more than
really,
you wanted to know.
no, 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 no. Oh, but thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for joining us today. And of course, for helping us unite the world through coffee.
Oh, thank you, Christy, and keep up the good work. I love your coffee.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And
Thank
thank
you.
you to our followers for joining us at U3 Coffee. We'll see you next time.